Hello friends, this video on structural organization of animals part 1 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Things to be covered in this lesson are animal tissues, organ and organ system, earthworm, cockroach and frogs. Okay, so in our previous lesson we spent some time understanding the morphology and anatomy of plants. So we looked at the external features as well as the internal features and characteristics of different types of plants. So here in this lesson we are going to concentrate on animals, and when we talk about animals, as you can see on the screen, a lot of variety of them comes into our mind, starting from a small bacteria to small insects to huge animals like elephants, even we human beings, cat, dogs, so many aquatic fishes. So everything comes to our mind when we think of animals. So now in this lesson, we are going to talk about the internal structure of these animals. Now again, in a similar way as we did in case of plants, in order to understand the internal structure, we need to have a thorough understanding on the composition or the basic composition of animals. Now, what is the basic building block of our body? It is nothing but cell. So we will spend some time understanding what is a cell, which we have already studied in our class 9th. What is cell, what are animal cells, what are plant cells. We will specifically talk in detail about the different types of animal tissues. So what are the different type of tissues, what are their functions, how do they look like, their structures. So we'll spend some time understanding that, and once we are clear with that, we will talk about the morphology and anatomy of some of the animals, because see, in animals it is like the variety is huge. So we just can't keep on talking about each and every animal. So we will talk about 3 different types, 3 animals of different categories, and we will look at their structure in detail. So that is our agenda in this lesson. So let us start with the basics. What are tissues? Now, as I said about cells, you all know, right? What is a cell? What is the difference between plant cell and animal cell? The structure and functions of the different cell organelles, all those things are very much clear to you. If not, you can refer the video on cell of class 9th. So that will help you to get clarified with the basics. So here we will start with tissues. So what are tissues? It is again a repetition, I know, but just to give you a quick recap. It is nothing but a group of cells that are similar in structure or work together to achieve a specific function. So their main agenda is this: they work together to achieve a common function. So some cells, if there are 100 cells in your body, some 10 cells group together to perform one function. Some 20 cells group together perform the second function. Again, some 30 cells group together perform a third function. So that grouping of cells to perform a common function is, then each such group is known as a tissue. Now when we talk about tissues, here you can see examples of tissues. Here on the left hand side you can see the lung tissue. Our lungs, they are made up of cells, and inside the lungs the cells group together to perform some specific function. So this is how they look like under a microscope. Again, on the right hand side you can see a plant tissue. Now a quick question for you. Now that we have already spoken about plant tissues in our previous lesson, just looking at this picture, can you tell which type of plant tissue is it? This is just a quick question based on our previous lesson. Exactly, this is nothing but sclerenchyma. You remember sclerenchyma, the tough and hard tissue which provides a lot of rigidity to the plant, right? Okay. Anyway, so we know what are tissues. Now, whenever we talk of tissues, this levels of organization comes into picture, because you have to be very clear about where tissue stands in this level of organization. Because in multicellular animals, in multicellular organisms rather, since there are so many cells inside the body, so the grouping has to be very proper. I mean, the division of labor, what we call as, that has to be very, very proper. So for that, a level has to be maintained. So let us look at it again, because I know I have explained this quite a number of times in our previous chapters, but still we will have a quick recap so that there is no confusion. The basic building block of any living organism, whether it is a unicellular or multicellular, whether it is plant or animal or whatever. So cell is the basic building block. So since here we are talking only about animals, the picture here you can see is an animal cell with all the cell organelles inside it. These cells group together to form a tissue. For example, the lung tissue, which I was just talking about. So even inside that lung tissue, there are many cells which have grouped together and they have decided to perform one function. Now many such tissues will group together to form an organ. And what is your organ? Organ is nothing but the lungs. Lungs are the organs, right? These are the organs which help in respiration. So there are many such organs in our body, right? The lungs are not the only organs. We have lungs, we have kidneys, we have stomach, we have intestine. So there are so many different organs which together form organ system. When I talk about organ system, can you think of some of the organ systems which are present in the human body? When I talk about organ systems, we have the digestive system which helps us in digestion and absorption of food. We have the excretory system which helps us to get rid of all the waste products from our body. We have the respiratory system which helps in the exchange of gases, cellular respiration. So these organs together form one organ system. For example, here in this picture you can see that the lung tissues form lung, and then the lungs together form, I mean not only lungs, like lungs, then your trachea, the bronchioles, mouth, pharynx, all these organs together form your respiratory system. Correct? And many such systems like the respiratory system, digestive system, circulatory system, excretory system, all these systems together will form the organism. And what is the organism? The organism in this case is a human being. So this is our level of organization, that the basic building block starts with cell, but some of these cells group together to form tissues. These tissues again group together to form organs, organs to organ system, and many such organ systems together form an organism. Now this hierarchy has to be maintained for proper functioning of a multicellular organism. Because see, in unicellular organism, it is quite simple because there is just one cell. So you cannot talk of division of labor, you cannot talk of some of the cells getting grouped together and all those stuff. So nothing comes into picture. There is just one cell, and that one cell has to perform all the functions, starting from digestion, starting from ingestion, that is intake of food, excretion, blood circulation, everything has to be done by that particular cell. So we cannot talk of all these concepts. But when it comes to multicellular organism, there are so many cells that you actually need a proper systematic process for them to function. Like it is the same example which I give always, which to make you understand it in an easier way is, if you have a class of 200 students and a specific task need to be performed, if you don't divide the task amongst the students, what will happen? It'll all be haphazard and messy, and at the end of it, the task will not be completed at all. Because maybe that all those 200 students will end up doing the same task, right? So that division of labor, this level of organization need to be maintained. It is very, very important. Now the question is, till now we are talking about tissues. Now, are all tissues similar, or do we have different type of tissues? I mean, when I talk about different type of tissues, again, you might be thinking, okay, in our previous lesson, we talked about the different types of plant tissues. Now, I'm not going to that level. On a very broader way, like we see so many living organisms, plants, animals. So all of them, do they have same type of tissues? Well, very broadly, we say that since there is a lot of difference between a plant cell and an animal cell, therefore there is again some difference between plant tissues and animal tissues. That is why we keep them separate. That is why we do not mix up plant and animals. If you see, we talk about morphology of plant in a separate as a separate thing. Again, we talk about plant tissues as a separate thing. We talk about animal tissues, animal morphology, animal anatomy as a separate thing, because there is a difference at the first level of organization, that is at the cellular level. The cell itself is different in case of plant and in case of animals. So we can say that no, all tissues are not similar. So this is exactly what you can see here. For example, this is your plant cell and this is your animal cell. So many differences, right? For example, in a plant cell, vacuole has a very important role to play because the storage of food is very, very important. So they generally have large vacuoles. Again, in plant cell, you have an additional cell wall for their protection, which is missing in case of the animal cell. Like in plant cell, you have one cell wall and you also have a plasma membrane. But in animals, you just have one layer for protection. So there are many such differences between the two. So based on that, we also talk about plant tissues and animal tissues. Because of this reason, we talk about both of them separately. Now in our previous lesson, we have already spoken in detail about plant tissues. We have looked at the different types of plant tissues and their subtypes, and we have actually studied it thoroughly. So in this lesson, we will be talking about the animal tissues. Now before that, let us look at some of the basic differences between plant tissues and animal tissues. When I talk about plant tissues, many of the plant tissues are dead supportive tissues to provide mechanical strength. One of the best example is sclerenchyma. Right? Sclerenchyma, they are all dead cells, but they provide a lot of mechanical strength, because for plants you need a lot of mechanical strength, right? Because they cannot move from one place to another. They'll be static at a place. So if there are winds, there are rains, so there has to be some mechanical strength to withstand all of that. Growth limited to specific regions, so dividing tissues are localized in those regions. This we have discussed in our previous lesson, right? Growth. When we talk about growth, we talk about the growth in length. We talk about the meristematic tissue, the apical meristem. We talk about the growth in width. We talk about the lateral meristem. So basically, we do not see those meristematic tissues present throughout the plant. Right? It is present only in some specific regions, and growth happens only in those regions. Whereas in case of animal tissues, mostly they are living tissues, except for maybe for few exceptions, but otherwise they are all living tissues. Growth is almost uniform throughout. So here, if you see in this picture, you can look at the difference. For example, if there is a small a kid, when he grows into an adult, the growth happens from everywhere. His height increases, his weight increases. If you look at his palm, his fingers, so everything increases proportionately, right? So we can say that the growth is almost uniform throughout. But in case of plants, it is not like that. For example, it is only the length which is increasing and the width which is increasing. Other than that, the leaves and everything, they will remain the same. Their size will not increase, the size of leaf and all those things. So these were some of the differences between plant tissues and animal tissues. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.